morning. So tonight we're going to look at Acts chapter 12. Interesting chapter, very interesting chapter in the book of Acts. Right, that's where we are, Acts 12, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on in this chapter leading up to Paul's journey in Acts 13. So we'll just start right off in verse 1 of Acts chapter 12. It says, "Now about that time," in the time that it's speaking of, previous chapter 11, verse 28, it talks about a prophet named Agabus prophesying that there would be a famine. Now in Acts chapter 12, verse 1, he's saying, now about that time when this famine hit. So that's that time. And we actually see that Saul and Barnabas in verse 29, in verse 30 of the chapter 11, it says that Saul and Barnabas went down to Jerusalem to kind of help the people out during the famine, because there was love in the church of Jerusalem. They had all things in common, but because of that, a famine hits, and now they're all equally poor. Because of that, all the resources are gone, and now they need help from the church, and they need help from places like Antioch. So we see that happening now. And the churches at Antioch, Paul, throughout his journeys, asked for alms to the poor in Jerusalem. In Romans, we see it. In a few other places, we see it. And, the church gladly gave. They gladly helped. Of course, we're going to help our brothers and sisters in Jerusalem. So they were helping, and Antioch sent Barnabas and Saul down to Jerusalem for this time. And it says, "Now about that time, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them." So Herod the king, and we see the name Herod all over the place in the New Testament, starting from very early in Herod the Great ordering all the children be killed, all the way to this Herod. So I kind of want to go through this, weed through this. Who is this Herod? Who was he in history? Was he Herod the Great? Is he the same Herod about around Jesus' birth? Yes?
What chapter are we on?
Acts chapter 12. So I'm going to kind of spell it out a little bit, because there are actually quite a few different Herods. And it's good to know in the book of Acts, because we're going to see a whole different Herod later on in the book of Acts. So the first one was the big one, the Great. So if your surname is the Great, you're probably a pretty good guy. But he was actually a pretty rough guy. He was great because he expanded further than all the other Herods. So the Herod was a title of a king or a ruler in Judea. They set it up through Rome that they would be rulers over Judea. They were not Jewish. They were actually Idumean, which is, they were Edomites. They were from the descendants of Esau. And if you know, like Esau, Jacob, Israel, Esau, Edomites, kind of a problem the whole way through history. And Rome set up these guys to be in charge of Judea. If you've ever taken church and world history, if you haven't, I recommend it. We'll go into this in detail, what happened, when it happened. So Herod the Great was from 73 BC, I think. Yep. Until 4 BC. We have Herod the Great. So he was the Herod around Jesus' birth. When the wise men, when the Magi were looking for Jesus, he's the guy they talked to when he said, "Oh, by the way, once you find him, come see me." That was Herod the Great. Not a great guy. He did expand the temple. He expanded, when you hear Herod's temple, he's the one that expanded the temple in Jerusalem. It was Herod. He had ups and downs. He really wanted the Jews to like him. At the same time, he was a brutal ruler and really bad to the people. Then his son became ruler, and he was also... So he was King Herod. Herod the Great was King Herod. This next one is Archelaus. Archelaus, or something like that. He didn't rule for that long. It was from 4 BC until 6 AD. And all these guys kind of had a love-hate relationship with Rome. Every once in a while, one of them would be put in jail through a Roman governor, through a Roman emperor, and it was a love-hate relationship. After him, so he was the guy in Matthew chapter 2, when Joseph was returning to Judea with the family after they fled to Egypt, they're coming back. He was going to go to Bethlehem, and he was scared to, and then the angel told him not to because this guy was in charge, and he wanted to protect him from him. So, and it was actually for a prophecy to be fulfilled that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but then raised in Nazareth. It was perfect the way God works, you know. After him was Herod Antipas. This is the guy that killed John the Baptist. 4 BC until 39 AD. He ruled for a while. He didn't rule the entire area that his grandfather, I believe, ruled. He didn't rule the entire area. It was called a tetrarch at that time. When you see tetrarch and the Herods, they ruled sections, but they broke it up. Rome broke it up. Rome didn't let them become kings anymore, and they broke it up from a few different rulers. But Herod Antipas is the big one. He killed John the Baptist. He tried Jesus when Pilate said, "Hey, what are you doing here? You have to go see Herod. Herod will try you." This is Antipas. This is this guy that tried Jesus at the end. None of these guys are really good guys at all. After him, we see this Herod. And this Herod is Agrippa the First. And we're going to actually read about his demise here, which is a very peaceful death. If you read ahead, you know that is not how he ended. And he was from 37 AD. I'm going to stop writing AD and BC because it's kind of assumed at this point. To 44. In the middle of this time, he was arrested in Rome. Brought to Rome, arrested under one of the emperors. And then an emperor named Caligula, your name might ring a bell, became emperor. And Caligula really liked this guy. And so he freed him from prison. He took it was weird, it was like a symbolic, he took a chain of steel, put it around his neck, took it off, and then put the same weight of gold around his neck to symbolize like the how much the emperor approved of him. And then he named him King Herod. He was the first Herod to be named king since Herod the Great. And he ruled all of Judea. And it really got to his head, and we'll see that at the end of chapter 12. But from 42, so I'll just write 42 here, to 44, he was king. King Herod Agrippa the First, and not just the tetrarch, not just a ruler of a region. And Caligula, if you know, was not a good emperor. Really, really bad guy. A lot of the Roman emperors, if you ever do a history study of the Roman emperors, they were sick, twisted people, for the most part. So, and then, so I'm going to erase some of it, if you have it. Everybody good? Yeah. And then we have Herod Agrippa the Second. Agrippa the Second, and he was he was around 50 AD, in the 50s, AD. I don't have the exact time of reign, because at that time it looked like he reigned right through the destruction of Jerusalem, but then everything got funny, so he was reigning, but he didn't really reign after Jerusalem was destroyed. He was kind of a puppet. And he was the guy that interviewed Paul in Acts chapter 26. We'll get to him. He's the one that said, "You almost had me. You almost persuaded me to become a Christian." That's that guy. So we see the Herod. So it clears a few things up, because a lot of times it's easy to read and it just says Herod. It's like, okay, who are they talking about? This can't be the same guy as Luke 2, and it's not. So we see Herod come in, and Herod, just like all the other ones, Herod Agrippa the First, he really wants to make the Jews happy. Because the Jews hated him. The Jews hated all the Herods because they were non-Jewish rulers over them. Rome kind of spit in their faces by saying, hey, we're going to have an Idumean rule over you. Rome knew what they were doing. That's kind of what Rome did. And they despised these guys. They hated these guys. So every once in a while they'll do something really nice, like Herod the Great upgraded the temple. Herod Agrippa the First, we have that already. I'm just gonna, just for continuity, Herod Agrippa the First, he really wanted to make the Jews happy, and an easy way to make the Jews happy at this point was to persecute the Christians. So he comes in, he's in power, and hey, these Christians are really making these Jewish leaders upset. Let me get on their good side, because again, the Jews hated the Herods because they weren't even Jewish. And he starts persecuting the Jews, or persecuting the Christians, I'm sorry. And then in verse 2, we see one of his orders is, and he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. And it's a very small, it's kind of interesting, it's a small verse, right? A very quick verse. And he had James put to death with a sword. And this is James, the brother of John, one of the big three, inner circle three with Jesus. He was one of the sons of thunder. When we see Jesus' core guys, the guys that he spent the most time with, the guys that he said, come with me while I pray, James was one of those guys. If you turn to Matthew chapter 20, please. And in verse 12, we'll start in verse 20. It says, then the mother of the sons of Zebedee, and the sons of Zebedee were James and John, came to Jesus with her sons, bowing down and making a request of him. And he said to her, what do you wish? And she said to him, command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and one on your left. Like, I want my sons to be your guys, on the right and the left. But Jesus answered, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? And they said to him, we are able. And he said to them, my cup you shall drink, but to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. When he said, my cup you shall drink, he's speaking of this. He's speaking of the things that they would suffer for him. And James was the first one. John is the only of the 12 that lived a natural life. He died in old age. But at the same time, he suffered tremendously in his life. So you have to be careful, because I've heard it before, like, oh, John, he lived to be an old age. Well, they tried to boil him in oil. They sent him on an island of Patmos, which was an island for the criminally insane, according to the Romans. Like, this is an island of insane criminals that the Romans deemed too insane for society. It was not a good place to live. And so he did suffer. He did suffer, as Jesus said here, the cup of affliction here. So Jesus predicted this death for James, and we see it and only in one verse, and I think a lot can be said about that, with Luke only using one verse, to really, because it would have been hard. It would have been hard for them at that time. And then he saw it in verse 3, when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. And these are the Herods. This is kind of what they do. Hey, you made them happy. Now I'm going to go for Peter. I'm going to arrest Peter too. And so he arrested Peter, and it says, now it was during the days of unleavened bread. And when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him 4 squads of soldiers. In the King James, it's quad. Anybody have a King James quad? Something. a nice long Italian garrison name. Anyway, it's 4 sets of 4. He put 4 squads of soldiers. Actually, I might have it here. In verse 4. Quaternions, yes. And it was so 4 sets of 4 guards. So there are 16 Roman guards there to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. Your King James will say Easter, and that's a bad translation. It's Passover. It's Pascha in the Greek, and it's Passover. The King James was translated in 1611, so it was just a bad translation by one of the translators, but it's literally Passover. To bring him out before the people. So Peter was kept in the prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. Fervent prayer. And in the King James, it's prayer without ceasing. And the word there is... Sorry, we're done with the Herods for a few chapters. Actually, we're done with the Herods until the end of this chapter. But the word for without ceasing is ektenis. And it really means instant, earnest, or urgent. Instant, earnest, and urgent prayer for Peter. They saw that there was a deep, deep need. James had just been beheaded. It seemed like it happened quickly, right? There's no real record of him spending a long time in jail. It happened. There's chapter 11, chapter 12, boom, James was martyred. And now they have Peter. And now Peter's in jail, who was the leader. Peter and James would have been the heads of that church, and John. And we see Peter arrested, and the people praying instantly, earnestly, and urgently for Peter, who was in bonds, who was arrested. Open up to Hebrews chapter 13 real quick. Well, not real quick. We're actually going to talk about this for a little bit. This is the go-to. This is the verse for Voice of the Martyrs. Hebrews 13:3. And we should remember those. If you don't subscribe to Voice of the Martyrs, I highly encourage it. It's a really good publication. It's good to know what's going on in the persecuted church. It's free magazine. Free is a good price. They really do a great job on showcasing some of the real stories of what's going on. In Hebrews 13:3, this is their verse. The verse that they use in a lot of their publications. It says, "Remember the prisoners as though imprisoned with them, and those who are ill-treated, since you yourselves also are in the body." To remember those that are persecuted, and to pray fervently, urgently, instantly, earnestly, and urgently, right, for them. To really pray for them. To really get on our knees and beseech God for them. Because it's biblical. Paul said in Colossians 4:18, he said, "Remember my bonds." Remember. And what he was saying is, remember I'm in prison. Pray for me. Remember where I am. Think about me. And to think about these things. And to think about the nations that Christianity is not, we don't have the freedom. We were actually discussing that recently. So on Saturday we have a big missions conference, so we're going to actually have a few groups. We're going to go to the parking lot over next to the Price Chopper, pass out tracts, preach the gospel. We're going to set up a sketchboard during track season in Saratoga and have some other people in the park in Saratoga. We're going to go out and do some confrontational evangelism because we have the freedom here to do it. We can do it, and nobody can say anything. The sketchboard, somebody might eventually say, hey, you need a permit to set something up, and we'll just move to another block or whatever. But we don't, there's no real persecution here. There is, but not like Iran, where you can't do this. Not like we have Pastor Mati Servio in Oman. Listening to him talk about making disciples and preaching the gospel, it's different. He has to have a different approach. And a lot of those Muslim countries, or even like the Muslim groups, there are certain Muslim groups that you have to be very careful. You can't just preach like you would preach in America. I heard and I've read some reports that Canada is kind of getting weird about evangelism. It's getting kind of different up there. It's becoming a hate crime to preach the gospel in Canada. And it's only right there. It's right to the north. Yes.
What about where you're going?
In Albania, it's very free. Albania prides themselves on a triple, on three, like they have like three religions kind of thing. They have Catholic, Orthodox, and Islam. And it's not, they're very open to that. Montenegro, where the vision is, for me, like where I feel like that God may be leading us to do a work in in Montenegro, there's a city that we went to last year. We made some contacts named Ulcin. It's an Albanian city, pretty much, in Montenegro. They speak Albanian for the most part, and we made some contacts. So you're very open. You can preach there. Podgorica, which is the capital, they're very Orthodox for the most part. You can preach there. Orthodox tends to be a little bit more closed when it comes to the gospel, just because it's very religious. It's a very religious system. It's really comfortable to get into the religious system. I want to go to the Sanjak region, which is in the northern part of Montenegro, northeast little nub of Montenegro, if you look at it on a map. They're Bosnian, for the most part. They're Bosniaks. They've recently, from what I've read, and I don't know, I haven't been there yet, but from what I've read, they're a little bit more Muslim than even Albania or in that part of Montenegro. And the reason behind it is just years of genocide, years of ethnic cleansing. They have no trust for Christianity. So the preaching the gospel is going to be a little bit different there. It's not going to be set up a sketchboard, I don't think. Maybe it is, I don't know. But a lot of it's going to be prayer and going in and forming relationships there and working there's a river, the Plav River, that runs through this region, and kind of working up the river and making connections and just seeing, throwing the seed and seeing what hearts the gospel lands on. So it'll be a little bit different. So Montenegro is kind of funny. There's like three different, very different major people groups there. But throughout the Balkans, that's the way it is. The borders are very gray. The borders are set, but the people group kind of expand past the borders.
What is Bosnia like?
What is Bosnia like? Bosnia, it's there's a Srpska area of Bosnia, which is very Serbian Orthodox, and then Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is very Muslim. And so it's like a dichotomy there. There's two different people groups which are very different, and they don't really like each other in Bosnia. And that caused a war in the 1990s, or more of a ethnic cleansing genocide than a war. But so we have to be careful where we go. And maybe God has called people here to the foreign mission field. And we want to know, as we go in, we want to be wise, right? To be wise of the area that we're going to, and to be wise to know what to expect from the people, and to know what to expect. And then at the same time, let the Holy Spirit do the work, because it's God's Spirit anyway. He does the work. And so to be wise and also moldable for the Spirit, and to let God work. So we don't really know what to expect, but we know we just trust the Lord, and that God will lead us the word, give us the word. So when you think about the word, just pray for boldness and pray for wisdom on how to reach those people. And so here in Hebrews 13:3 it says, "Remember the prisoners as though in prison with them." There are prisoners in North Korea. There are prisoners in China. There are prisoners in Iran. There are prisoners all over the world, people all over the world in prison simply for worshiping God, worshiping the Lord. That's it. And they're in prison for it all over the world. And to remember them as if we're there with them. And that's so the writer of Hebrews, like a lot of dispute of who wrote Hebrews, probably Paul. If this is Paul writing it, to think of his mind on it, because he's been in prison at this point. And saying remember them as if you're there with them. to think about them as if you're there, to really be broken over the circumstances, to be broken over the of what they're going through, because they're there because they love the Lord, and we have a lot of freedom here in America for now. That could change in an instant. It's changed in countries around the world in an instant, really. If you look at China with Hudson Taylor and China Inland Mission, he had a lot of freedom, kind of. A lot of ethnic stuff going on with him, if you've read the book. A lot of persecution, but that all changed in like one revolution, changed that country. And Mao Zedong came up, and boom, now it's pretty rough there. Same with Russia and the revolution there, the communist revolution there, and Cuba also, if you know the history of Cuba. A lot of freedom, and then one day it's not there anymore. Could happen anywhere. I'm not saying it will happen here, but it could happen here. And to know that our freedom's in the Lord, that Jesus is our Sabbath, right? Our rest is in Him. So to remember those that are in bonds. Turn to 1 Corinthians 12 also. To kind of piggyback off of Hebrews 13:3, where it talks about your members also. It says, if one member suffers, all members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. To remember that the body, we see that so many times in the New Testament, that the Holy Spirit's really trying to tell us that we are one body, that we are one unit, that the church is not divided, that Christ is the head, right, in 1 Corinthians, where it says, is Christ divided? And He's not. We see in Ephesians that every joint supplies the need for every part of the body. And to remember that, and especially, so as we work as one body, as we work as even the church here in Malta, to remember that every member is a part of our body. And if something's sick, if something's injured, it affects all of us. Just thinking about, like, if you have like an issue with your toe, right, and you walk with a limp on that toe, walk with a limp if you have a broken or a sprained or turf toe, if you play sports, it's going to affect your whole body. It's going to affect your leg, your calf, your thigh, your hips, right? It's going to affect your hips. And to remember that everybody in the body is so important for everything else, and to the weak and the people that are being persecuted, that are suffering, to remember them in prayer, and to pray instantly, earnestly, and urgently for the persecuted church. We have a map on our wall in our kitchen that says "Pray for the persecuted church," and it's the Voice of the Martyrs map, and it lists all of the countries where Christianity is illegal and the countries that are kind of gray. There's a few countries that are kind of gray. It's not technically not illegal, but the government doesn't do anything to stop the persecution. They let people persecute the church, and there are many nations like that as well.
Excuse me, what verse was that in 1 Corinthians 12?
1 Corinthians 12:26.
All right, thank you.
Sorry. So back to the book of Acts. So we have Peter arrested. Peter goes to prison or goes to jail. And Agrippa, being the nice guy that he is, says, well, we're going to wait until after the Passover. We're going to wait until after the feast before we execute this guy. And they had every plan to execute Peter at this time. And it says, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. In 12:6, it says, on the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and guards in front of the door were watching over the prison. Like, look at this security. So he had a chain on each wrist, and that chain went to the opposite wrist of a Roman soldier. And he was sleeping between them. And then you have the guys guarding the doors, right? You have the guys guarding the doors. So just in case that wasn't enough, there was a guy at the door to make sure that, okay, he's not going to get through here if this little fisherman can make it through two chained soldiers, Agrippa spared no expense. He wanted to tell the Jews, listen, I got this. He's going to be taken care of. Look at all of the security that I have for this guy. He's not getting out of this. He's done here. And it kind of reminds me of the tomb, right, of Jesus' tomb. Let's put a rock in front of it in Roman soldiers there because he's not getting out of that tomb. And we see this, we've seen this before. And I like how it says that Peter was sleeping, right? And it's the night before he was going to bring him forward. It was the night before his execution, and he's chained between two soldiers, and he's sleeping between the guys. And I don't know if I could sleep before, but he was the peace that passes understanding, right? The peace in him where he knew that he trusted the Lord, and he trusted him no matter what, and the Holy Spirit gave him rest, gave him sleep, and he was able to sleep before these soldiers. Just seems so amazing that he would be able to sleep. And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared, and a light shone in the cell, and he struck Peter's side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the King James said he smote him in the side, right? He gave him a little jab in the side, saying, "Get up now. It's time to go." And, it must have, and who knows, how this happened, because we're going to read through this story, and it just seems fantastical, right? As we read this, it seems amazing. It says, and his chains fell off his hands, and the angel said to him, "Gird yourself up, put on your sandals," and he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." And he went out and continued to follow, and he did not know what was being done by the angel. He did not know that what was being done by the angel was real, but he thought he was seeing a vision. And when they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened for them by itself. And they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. And it's so amazing what happened here. And we don't know, so this is probably Peter recalling this to Luke at a later point of everything that happened. But it says that, he didn't know if it was a vision at one point. And just, what happened to those guards that were chained to Peter's wrist? What happened to the guards that were supposed to be guarding the door? How did the gate open in front of them by itself? It's really amazing what happened. It's to see, have it pictured in your mind. It's a very fantastical thing. And to try to, I'd like to know what miracle the angel did to cause this too. How did they do this? Because it's all Peter knows is it happened. All he knows is that he was told by an angel to grab his cloak, put on his sandals, and get up quickly. And everything happened. And in verse 11, it says, when Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for sure that the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and all that the Jewish people were expecting." And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also called Mark, where many were gathered and were praying. And so many of the commentators believe that there were 4 watches at night for the Roman soldiers of how they would shift guards. And because it was at night, and because Peter was sleeping, they think this was between the 3 and 6 o'clock watch. There were 2 changes of watches. There was a 3 o'clock change and a 6 o'clock change. And there was one at midnight also. The commentators believe this was between the 3 and 6 a.m. night watch switch that this happened. And what was the church doing? It was praying. And it's just so amazing to think about this. He went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was also John Mark. And there were many gathered, where many were gathered together and were praying, to pray through the night.